Hello and welcome to our presentation on the gender differences in the sport of rodeo. Now first you might ask yourself, what is rodeo? Well, rodeo is a sport that has been centered and originated from the daily workings and happenings on a cattle ranch, and it over time has quickly become a very well followed, highly publicized event that goes from the high school to the college to even the professional level. And here are listed the different events between the male and female competitors. But keep in mind that females can only compete professionally on a barrel racing event. The first event that I want to cover is barrel racing. Barrel racing is a female event where the female who's on horseback is running a course in a clover shape around 3 barrels put in a triangle. Now this race is considered one of the safer races within rodeo, and it is a timed event. Now the second one that I want to cover is called goat tying. The woman runs down the arena on a horse, jumps off while the horse is still moving, and ties a goat's 3 legs to keep it from moving. This is derived from the male event called calf tying, but it's considered safer and easier because women can lift a goat much better than they can lift a full-size calf. Now, one of the things that we want you to see here is the difference between the men and women's sports. Now, although the women's sports are considered tough in nature compared to a lot of things, women are still doing events that are much more protected than those of men. Here you can see men doing sports that are called rough stock, and the risk of danger and injury is much more than it is with the female sports. Now, although rodeo does a good job of creating this powerful, strong, capable woman who does things that not a lot of women are encouraged to do, it still has these gender roles that you can see in a lot of places in this society. And these are only reinforced as women are only allowed to compete with other women, and they're only allowed to do the events that are designated for women. And so one thing that we were really fond of is when women compete or step out of their box and go ahead and do those events that are not typically considered women. These rough stock events where they get on wild trained animals who are trained to buck or to try to get you off. And so one thing that we really were excited about is seeing a woman get on a rough stock animal. So here is a woman getting on a bucking bronc, which is not the first time. It is not completely unique, but it is very rare. And so to see a woman be able to have the courage to step out and do this and be encouraged to do this is very unique and encouraging for the females. And although this might seem like one simple act of bravery or outstanding moment on her part, this is more than that. It sends waves for the industry for the future, and she doesn't let the typical femininity that's expected of her stop her from being successful and brave in her actions. And this is setting a precedent for women in the future who aspire to do this but might not have the bravery to do it as one of the first women. Through the course of this video, one thing that we'd like you to consider is how do you think your experience has shaped your gender identity and your mindset towards your ability to achieve your goals. And if you're female, we'd like you to consider this quote informing how you think your life has changed that. And what I think plays a big role in all of this is this idea of gender role socialization, which is the process by which we learn what is socially acceptable for males and females. As you can see from these pictures, there's female children who are early on conditioned to be a nurturer, a homemaker, and a caregiver, and men or young boys who are conditioned to be able to fix things, to drive fast cars, to be tough, and to be bold and powerful. Now, one thing that really ties into this is this idea of gender ideology, where we take these expected traits of masculinity and femininity and we use them to define kids and humans before they're even old enough to really understand. And there's nothing wrong with being masculine and being feminine, but we need to keep in mind that 90% of human traits overlap between genders. we did an interview with a male student athlete who's on the Cal Poly Rodeo team. But some stuff we want you to keep in mind before we get into this interview is first, this idea of gender binary or hegemonic masculinity, that men are expected to be a certain way and stay within their roles. And this ties into the man box, where men are expected to be tough, to be strong, to be without fault. And men here, they build this masculine capital with this masculine feature, and this allows them to move up in the hierarchy of men and of the social dynamic. And truthfully, a lot of the ways that men act this way is because of the social conditioning that we've created in this society, that men are not supposed to have traits that are associated with females. And lastly, we want you to consider the idea of how imbalanced the administration is in terms of female coaches, female administrators versus male in all areas of sport, not in just the sport of rodeo.
Hi, I'm here with Chase. He's on the Cal Poly Rodeo team, and I'm going to ask him a few questions. Growing up, do you feel like you were conditioned to be or act like a boy, like told not to cry or not to show emotion?
I wasn't told not to cry or not to show emotion. I think that's fine. But, I don't know, growing up, I feel like I was put in an environment where, you're encouraged to act more masculine if you're a guy.
Okay, now do you feel pressure to prove you're a man in times of trial, pain, sadness?
Not really. That's just kind of how I grew up, and it's kind of just part of how I am and how I like to handle my situations.
Okay, so you have a male rodeo coach. How do you think it'd be different if you had a female coach?
I think for the most part it'd be okay, but I think there's things physically that a female coach would have a harder time doing than a male coach in a sport like rodeo.
Mm-hmm. Have you ever had to compete through an injury?
Yeah.
If so, why do you feel the need to compete with that injury?
Because I want to win. Yeah, I don't know, depends how bad the injury is and if it's worth it but if it is worth it, then yeah, I would rodeo through it.
Do you think it's different for a girl if she has an injury?
No, I think it's all the same in rodeo. If you want it, no matter what, you're gonna get it.
Alright, thanks.
Now, after this interview, we have another question that we'd like you to consider, and that is, how do you think the institution of sport would be different if there were more female coaches and administrators? And when in doing this, we don't want you to just consider what it would be like between coach and athlete, but also consider how the whole environment might change, how positive or negative you think it would be for females and for males in the sport.